So today we will discuss about respiration. Respiration is defined as a metabolic process in which the living cells of an organism obtain energy in the form of ATP by taking in oxygen and giving out carbon dioxide by the oxidation of complex organic substance. The respiratory system of human consists of the nasal cavity, pharynx, larynx, trachea, bronchi and lungs, which is together known as the respiratory tract. The main function of the respiratory system is the gaseous exchange in which oxygen is obtained from the atmosphere and carbon dioxide is removed from the blood because oxygen is necessary for normal metabolism and carbon dioxide is a waste product as a result of metabolism. The respiratory system also helps to regulate the blood pH. So this is the structure of human respiratory systems. It consists of nasal cavity, pharynx, trachea, larynx, a pair of lungs, bronchioles, bronchi. The sac-like structure is known as the alveoli and the diaphragm. The human respiratory system consists of a pair of lungs and a series of air passages that leads to the lungs. The entire respiratory tract consists of the nose, pharynx, larynx, trachea, bronchi and the bronchioles. The air from the atmosphere enters the nose through the nostrils. The air present in the nose filter out particles in the incoming air. The air is moistened by the mucus present in the nose and it is warmed by the blood flowing through the capillaries in the nose. The respiratory tract from the nose to the bronchioles is lined by the mucous membranes and the cilia. The mucus and the cilia acts as an additional filters. The human respiratory systems behind the nose lie the pharynx, that is the throat. The air passes from the pharynx to the larynx, that is known as the voice box. The opening leading to the larynx is called the glottis. It is protected by a lid which is known as the epiglottis, which prevents the food from entering the passage to the lungs. From the larynx, the air passes down to the trachea, that is also known as the windpipe. It is guarded by 16 to 20 C-shaped cartilage rings which prevent the trachea from collapsing. The trachea divides into two tubes known as the bronchi. Each bronchus divides and branches out in the form of linear tubes called bronchioles. The bronchioles enter the lungs and divide further into fine branches called the alveolar ducts. This is known as the sac-like structure which is known as the alveoli. This opens into extremely thin-walled grape-shaped air sacs known as the alveoli. Each alveolus is covered by a web of blood capillaries. The actual exchange of gases between the air and the body takes place in the capillary covered alveoli inside the lungs. Here the oxygen from the atmosphere gets into the alveoli and goes into the blood, and the carbon dioxide from the blood get outside from our body. The oxygen binds to the hemoglobin present in our blood and it is taken to the different part of the blood. The total surface area through which the exchange of gases takes place is increases due to the presence of alveoli. So the function of the alveoli is to increase the surface area for gaseous exchange. The total surface area can be about 100 times that of the body. The larger surface area of the alveoli allows sufficient oxygen intake needed for releasing the large amount of energy required by the human being. So the respiration can be divided into three basic steps. One is the pulmonary ventilation or the breathing, and the second one is the external respiration which is also known as the pulmonary respiration, and the third one is the internal respiration or the tissue respiration. First we will discuss about the pulmonary ventilation. It is the inhalation, that is the inflow and outflow of air, and it involves the exchange of air between the atmosphere and the alveoli of the lungs. It takes place due to the alternating pressure difference created by the contraction and relaxation of the respiratory muscles. Second one is the external respiration or the pulmonary respiration. It involves the exchange of gases between the alveoli of the lungs and the blood in the pulmonary capillaries across the respiratory membranes. In this process, the pulmonary capillary blood gains oxygen and they loses carbon dioxide. The third one is the internal respiration or the tissue respiration, which involves the exchange of gases between the blood in systemic capillaries and tissue cells. In this, the blood loses carbon dioxide and gains CO2. Within the cells, the metabolic reaction that consumes oxygen and give off carbon dioxide due to the production of ATP is known as the cellular respiration. Then we will discuss in detail about the breathing process. The first one is the inhalation. It takes place when the volume of the thoracic cavity is increased and the air pressure is decreased. The external intercostal muscles contract and the internal intercostal muscles relaxes. Due to the contraction of the external intercostal muscles, the ribs is pulled outward, resulting in increase in the thoracic cavity size. The increase in thoracic cavity size decreases the pressure inside the lungs. The thoracic cavity further enlarges due to the contraction of diaphragm, lowering the diaphragm and increasing the size of the thoracic cavity. With the increase in the size of the thoracic cavity, the lungs expand simultaneously. As the lungs expand, the air pressure is reduced inside the lungs. So to equalize the pressure, the atmospheric air gets into the lungs. So during the inspiration, the size of the thoracic cavity increases, due to which the pressure inside the thoracic cavity decreases, and to equilibrate it, the atmospheric air gets into the lungs. And during the expiration, what happens? The size of the thoracic cavity decreases, due to which the pressure increases and the air is pushed out of the lungs. So, exhalation. It takes place when the size of the thoracic cavity is reduced and the air pressure is increased. The internal intercostal muscles contract and external intercostal muscles relaxes. Due to the contraction of internal intercostal muscles, ribs are pulled inward, resulting in decrease in the size of the thoracic cavity. Further, the diaphragm is pushed upward due to the relaxation. With the decrease in size of the thoracic cavity, the lungs is compressed or the size of the lungs is reduced, due to which the pressure increases and the air is forced outward. The second one is the external respiration. External respirations, the gaseous exchange takes place between the lungs and the blood. It is the diffusion of oxygen from the air in the alveoli of the lungs to the blood in the pulmonary capillaries, and the diffusion of CO2 in the opposite direction. External respiration in the lungs converts deoxygenated blood coming from the right side of the heart into the oxygenated blood that returns to the left side of the heart. As the blood flows through the pulmonary capillaries, it picks up oxygen from the alveolar air and unloads CO2 into the alveolar air. This process is called as the exchange of gases, which is carried out by the process of diffusion. The partial pressure of oxygen in the alveoli is higher, that is about 104 mmHg, than that in the deoxygenated blood in the capillaries of the pulmonary arteries, that is 95 mmHg. As the gas diffuses from a higher to a lower concentration, the movement of oxygen is from the alveoli to the blood. The reverse is occurs in the case of carbon dioxide. The partial pressure of carbon dioxide is higher in the deoxygenated blood, that is 45 mmHg, than in the alveoli, which is about 40 mmHg. Therefore, the carbon dioxide passes from the blood to the alveoli. Then the internal respiration. Internal respiration is the exchange of gases which takes place in the tissue, so also known as the cellular respiration. In the cells or in the tissue, the oxygen is carried out in the form of oxyhemoglobin, which get dissociated, liberating the free oxygen. The free oxygen then oxidized the glucose present in the respiratory enzyme in the presence of respiratory enzyme to liberate the CO2, water and energy. The energy is utilized by the tissue for its vital activities, while the carbon dioxide is diffused from the tissue. The exchange of gases between the tissue blood capillaries and tissue cells is known as the internal respiration or the cellular respiration. The partial pressure of oxygen is higher, that is 95 mmHg, than that of the body cells, which is about 40 mmHg. As a result, the oxygen is diffused from the partial pressure of the oxygen is higher, that is about 95 mmHg, than that of the body cells, which is about 40 mmHg, and the partial pressure of carbon dioxide is less, that is 40 mmHg, than that of the body cells, which is about 45 mmHg. Therefore, the oxygen diffuses from the capillary blood into the body cells, and carbon dioxide is diffused from the body cells into the blood via the tissue fluid. Now the blood becomes deoxygenated. The latter is carried out to the heart and hence to the lungs.